Why is Microsoft so bad at translating Italian into something other than flawed English? And does this have implications for using it to translate the other way? Well, only an Italian could answer that with certainty, but we can take an educated guess. Yes, we're talking about how bad language translation might be in Microsoft Word. Obviously, all languages will have differences, so issues with your languages might be different. But this will give you an idea of what to look for if you want to achieve a good translation. No, I'm not assuming you would use this to cheat, merely as a tool to help you. Let's get started. I'm going to use some sample text, a story you may have heard recently. Here it is in Microsoft Word. So, to translate it, go to the Review menu, Language, and Translate. You have two options, Translate Selection and Translate Document. Translate Selection has a limited capacity, but to use it, highlight the text, select the option, and a box will appear on the right with the text. If you scroll down, you'll see the translation. There are pull-downs to change the language if, say, English was not what you wanted it translated into. I could, for example, pick French or Spanish. For text of this length, I need to select the Document option. In this case, you have the option to change languages first and a button to start the translation. It then puts the translation into a new document. And here's one I did earlier. So, what are some of the issues with translating Italian? No, I've no idea why it didn't translate the title, unless the attempted wordplay was just too much for it. Anyway, number 1. If you're using tenses with auxiliary verbs, the translation is going to be significantly worse. You might get a lot of haves where we wouldn't put them, and vice versa. Shoulds and woulds could be a problem too. There's one of these in here. The lie he should have told, rather than the lie she would have to tell. Number 2. If you're writing something fictional, where who's being talked about or talking is changing all the time, it'll get things wrong a lot. This is because Italian doesn't require personal pronouns with verbs, except for emphasis. So when it gets to third person, or first and third plural with essere in present and compound tenses, it always plumps for he or I, if there is no other clue. There are lots of examples of he and him instead of she and her here. Plus, near the end, there's a can I understand our language instead of can they understand our language? The thing is, there usually is a clue. Only trouble with that is it's often in a previous sentence. Previous sentences don't count in these translations because that kind of context isn't currently a part of these systems. That shouldn't be a problem in languages where personal pronouns are always used. But if they aren't, your translation could be very confusing. Number 3. It also goes for literal translation because it can't do anything else. Colloquial phrases which might be really common in the language are often mistranslated because these systems don't, at present at least, do much in the way of colloquial. How about give you a displeasure instead of upset you? Very awkward. Number 4. It's most likely to go for the commonest meaning of a word, but we all know that many words have multiple meanings depending on context. However, as we've already discussed, context, other than the few words around the one being translated, isn't really a thing with this kind of translator. here we have now is time instead of now is now. I will forgive it with this one, although I think I probably need to have a definite article on the second order for it to be correct. Is that enough things to highlight? Actually, no, I'm going to add one more. Changing names. Usually someone's actual name I wouldn't expect to be translated, but at least I'd want it to be consistent if it were. It's not. Federico is deliberately spelled with 2 C's because of how names happen in this world. You'll have to go back to the first story for that if you don't know. However, sometimes it keeps the original, sometimes it puts Frederick or Rich where it's shortened, which is not even consistent with Frederick, and sometimes it puts how Federico should be spelled in our world, with 1 C. Why? That is annoying. I'm sure there are more things. I mean, I've only picked out the really awkward stuff, but you get the picture. So don't trust it to get things right going the other way either, because I'm sure you'll get issues with that too. If you can usually tell when an AI has written something in English, there's no reason to think that other languages are any different. However, does this mean this is a bad tool for language learning? No, not entirely. If you've written something in your target language and you get the system to auto-translate it, you will be able to see if you've constructed a sentence incorrectly. For example, if a tense might be off, or, as I often do, you've used suoi instead of loro to designate their. I now know why I do this, by the way. It's because of Spanish. So you can find some of these errors in your text which won't be picked up with a spelling or grammar check, if you ignore the bad English. I'm even starting to use it to do the English translations of my stories. Correcting the genders and the awkward phrases is much quicker than manually translating one of my longer stories myself. You just have to know the pitfalls and pay extra attention.